Hello everyone, how y'all doing? So, time has passed and I actually didn't notice that it won't be too long before Blue Reflection Quartet actually comes out. Now, the game, I did end up pre-ordering it on CD Japan because unfortunately it doesn't seem like they're gonna sell a physical copy of it in the West, so I had to order it from Japan. So I guess we have that problem, which is a whole other rabbit hole when it comes to certain Japanese games and publishers and how they seem to prioritize selling their games on the Asian market more so than the West. It's something that's been honestly, it's something that I've been thinking about even before, and I just realized that my screen is actually a little bit cropped. Let me adjust that just a little bit. And hang on. All right, it's fine now. But yeah, that is something that I've been commenting on ever since probably Sega started doing that with Like a Dragon, the man who erased his name, whatever, where they weren't selling a physical copy of it in the West. So that was a whole other rabbit hole. But I ended up pre-ordering that, so I don't really feel the need to buy this on Steam. But also because it's honestly very unlikely that I'm going to play this game day one, because at the end of the day, this is a new game. This is just a compilation of games that I've already played in the past, and the most recent one, Blue Reflection Second Light, it actually hasn't been that long since I actually replayed it for the third time. So I'm gonna keep the copy, but as for the Steam version, maybe I'll just wait until it gets a sale, and then after that I'll replay it, because like presumably it is gonna have some quality of life improvements. But there is something that I do want to comment on a little bit, which is the system requirements, because I am comparing this with Blue Reflection Second Life because realistically, this is the game that's the most demanding. And one thing I did notice is that the processor requirements actually seem to be exactly the same as the first game. Now, one thing I do want to note is in minimum requirements, it does show Ryzen 3 3200G, while in the recommended it shows Ryzen 3 3100. Now, don't be misled by the two. This processor is actually more powerful than this. It's actually, I believe it has more L3 cache, and it also just has higher cores, which that's the part I'm actually interested in, which is the fact that when I look at these system requirements, it does seem to be the same as before, but what this also means is that in general, it does seem like this is still by and large a game that would typically be designed for a PS4. Because a lot of the times, like if you start seeing games that are sort of like next gen or ninth gen exclusive games, you'll notice that the processor requirements, what usually it's in recommended, but sometimes I'll even see this in minimum, where they'll start recommending like a Zen 2 hexa-core, like the 3600 or something like that. And then here in the graphics, they'll probably recommend, Torin or RDNA 2, but here it does seem to be exactly the same here. So what this at least shows to me is that despite the fact that they are making a build that was meant to be for a next gen console, because Blue Reflection Quartet, this is, meant to be like a PS5 release. Despite that, it doesn't seem like the overall system requirements are going to change a whole heck of a lot. They are still using DirectX 11, which is interesting. So, I guess in terms of, could this result in like the game being a little bit harder to run? Because we've seen that with some games, like for example, I believe it was Mafia 2, where when that got a definitive edition, the game just overall ran worse. Like it just became more demanding compared to the original one, which was a PS3 game. And in fact, and it wasn't just that it ran worse, even like the size. Like the original Mafia 2 is like what, 7 GB of just overall size, while the definitive edition was like 40 or something like that. It was definitely a very bloated game, and I know it's because they did have to like import a bunch of like 4K assets, and I'm sure in the porting process they ended up bloating up the game a little bit, which I know it does end up happening a little at some point. But in this case, it doesn't seem like a lot is actually changing. Like even the storage size, yes, it says 55 gigabytes, but that's because it's literally 4 games. So that actually makes sense. I'm actually expecting this to be a little bit higher. So what I would say, the only thing that does seem like they changed here is that in graphics, here they were really like, especially when it comes to AMD cards, they really wanted to specify the fact that you needed PCI Express 4.0, but I don't think they're gonna ask here because like I don't think, I mean, nowadays, if people are building PCs, they're probably not buying motherboards that have PCIe 3.0, and so that's probably why they didn't specify. But they definitely did have to specify the VRAM requirements, because VRAM is one of those things where, you know, it's sort of like a topic and that people tend to bring up as far as like whether or not modern games are requiring more VRAM. I will say though that if this is meant to run more or less the same as the first game, then what I'm gonna tell you right now is, at least when it comes to Blue Reflection Second Light, I don't think the VRAM is necessary. I mean, in my experience, it doesn't really seem like the VRAM is the main bottleneck. It's actually the clock speed. If your CPU has lower clock speeds, like you can actually notice a trend where the game tends to run a lot better the higher the clock speed is. Like you can actually know, and the reason why I started noticing this is because I believe I was testing this game on like my one of my virtual machines, and the thing about virtual machines is that sometimes they're the scheduler in whichever VM you're in is not going to push the CPU power to, you know, to its capabilities when gaming, because you kind of have to change some not really configuration. You kind of just have to change the governor profile on the host system. And I noticed that when I did that, I did notice a difference in the clock speed, and this would also lead to Blue Reflection overall running better. So clock speed is actually the thing that you should worry about. VRAM, I don't think, as far as like my memory, I don't think VRAM really matters a whole heck of a lot. But I will say one thing though, is that one of the things about Blue Reflection Second Light in specific that I felt like they could have been a lot better on is have more options for resolutions, because when you get to 1080p, I think there might be a resolution. No, I don't think there is. Like you go to 1080p and then you jump to 1440p and then it's 4K. So any other resolutions, like for example 1800p, that doesn't exist. I do hope that they do have that option in this game. I don't know if they actually will have that option, but I don't know. I feel like having more options is always better because, honestly, if you can kind of find like a good balance of like resolutions as far as like having a stable frame rate, I think that's always a good thing. Now, the other thing that also kind of piqued my interest is the part here in the notes. Now, here, I don't think they recommended an SSD, but they did recommend here, which I guess out of everything, like out of all of the specs here that would determine the difference between, a game that was originally designed for a PS4 and a game that's designed to, well, it's at least it's a build that was meant to be ported to a PS5. I guess the SSD would be the main impact, because we're talking about, a mechanical hard drive versus an NVMe SSD. So I guess this part is probably the most reasonable one. I don't know how much impact this actually will have, but I want to believe most people at least have a SATA 3 SSD. I would recommend NVMe, but they didn't say NVMe, they just said SSD. Now, did they say here the above specs are expected to provide a 60 FPS gameplay? Now, also at 1080p. Now, this is something that's actually giving me a little bit of hope, because I'm gonna be honest with you. If we were specifically talking about Blue Reflection Second Light, because the first game, look, that game is like really easy to run. Who cares? Second Light is the real kicker here. If what you're saying here is true, and these specs are enough to get a stable 60 FPS, then that actually makes me believe that they might have actually optimized this game a little bit. Because I used to have a Ryzen 7 5700G, and the GPU at the time I believe was the 6600, the RX 6600, which I'm pretty sure it's more powerful than this, or at the very least it has a more up-to-date architecture. I mean, it's the non-XT, but like, I'm pretty sure that card is more powerful than this, or the very, maybe even if it's marginally. And yeah, that game, I mean, to be fair, I was playing with the highest settings, but like I wasn't always able to get a stable 60 FPS, and so I guess that would be the one thing that would interest me. Like, does this game overall run better? Because I believe Yakuza Kiwami 2 does have a more up-to-date version of the Dragon engine. And based on other people's accounting, it does actually seem like the game on PC runs a little bit better. It seems to be a little bit more optimized. So a part of me is wondering if we could be seeing something similar here, because I'm sure it would have had to update the engine, especially for the older games, because they literally ended up introducing features. So I want to believe they probably did upgrade the engine since then. And if that's the case, I want to believe that maybe they did end up optimizing just a little bit. So that is something that I'm very interested in seeing how it goes. The other thing that also kind of interested me was the part here where they said, with graphics quality set to standard and VSync turned on. VSync turned on is a very interesting statement to make, because if you remember Blue Reflection Second Light, that game did not give you an option to enable or disable VSync, or even lock the frame rate. So for them to say that, did they finally give you the option to enable and disable VSync? I'm very interested. I'm genuinely interested in knowing if that's the case or not. I really hope so. Because, the way how I ended up disabling the VSync was because I think I ended up using an environmental variable from like the XVK or something like that in order to brute force VSync to be turned off. So if I don't have to do that anymore, that would certainly be a good thing. So yeah, I guess that's that's just overall my discussion. They do talk a little bit about audio, but that's not too important. So yeah. Oh, one other thing. This game is deck verified. Now, the original game, it's like playable, but it's not verified. But here, it is verified. Steam Deck verified. And if it's Steam Deck verified, that means it's SteamOS verified. Though granted, I think the game was always SteamOS verified. It was really just the Steam Deck that was the main issue because of the oh, wait, if it's Steam Deck verified, I wonder if that also means they now have a resolution for 800p specific to the Steam Deck. And I hope this also means that they adjusted the UI and the text size to actually fit the small screen of the Steam Deck, which if that's the case, boy, is that a good thing, because I also believe that option didn't exist back then. And additionally, the resolution it would default to at the time was like 720p if I'm not mistaken. But not only that, it would also, like, every time you boot up the game, because that's the other thing about this game in general, is it doesn't, the Blue Reflection Second Light, it actually doesn't save your previous graphics preset. It would always reset if you had like a custom one. And so I wonder if this means that the game does allow you to have a custom preset, and every time you put the game up, it will actually save that preset. Or maybe if it has like a preset dedicated to the Steam Deck, like a Steam Deck mode or something like that. I do prefer, well, honestly, I would be happy with both options, but I would be very interested if they actually let you save the preset, because again, from what I remember, like every time I booted up the game, if I had like a custom preset, I would always have to change it again because it would just never save it. At least in my experience. Maybe for other people, might have not have been the case, but in my case, it would always reset. So I hope that doesn't happen. And yeah, honestly, overall, this seems like a pretty interesting release. And also, one other thing, this game, it's a bundle of 4 games, but it has a pretty modest price, like 49, like 50 euros. I mean, compared to one game that costs $60, that's a pretty good deal. Which, by the way, that's the other thing I want to mention. Koei Tecmo, I'm gonna be honest with you, like I really think that you should lower the price of this game, because they did say they weren't going to delist this game, which good. I don't think they need to, but you gotta lower the price. Like this price is a little bit ridiculous, and I think even I'm pretty sure even the first game is also priced similarly. Let me check. Yeah, they're both priced at like $60. Like, dude, you can't have singular games costing $60. Meanwhile, this bundle is costing 49. And granted, I know it makes the bundle look very good, and frankly speaking, aside from maybe some concerns regarding censorship, which is something that I feel like a lot of people are really concerned, especially with the first game, which I know for a fact is gonna have some censorship. But if you're not someone who's like super bothered by that, I feel like this bundle is like the go-to. It's the obvious purchase. But that doesn't mean people aren't gonna want to have this version. Aren't maybe they want to buy this specific version for whatever reason they have. And dude, you gotta lower this price. And I know the game usually does get like it's on a sale, but still, like you gotta change this. Like, dude, this game's from 2021. You can't still be selling this for $60. You're not PlayStation. And I'm saying this because even when PlayStation does it, I get really mad. Nintendo is a lost cause. I don't even expect them to lower the price officially. But anyway, that's all I wanted to share. Again, I'll probably wait until this gets on a sale. I'm just waiting for the order from CD Japan to arrive, and or hell, who knows? Maybe I'll do an impulsive buy just because I want to support. I don't know. I'll probably wait for feedback on from other people because I mean, if this is like a bad release, then there's no reason to buy this when I already have. Well, I have two of these games. I don't have the other two because, well, one wasn't a game and the other one was a mobile game. So yeah, maybe I'll just wait. I'll watch. I'll like check reviews to see if it's worth it. But yeah, that's all.